Back in the Mediterranean, though Calabria had provided a moral victory, technically speaking, the result was inconclusive. What Cunningham truly required was a stinging, decisive blow. Fate would deliver on the morning of July 19, 1940, at the Battle of Cape Spada. Dispatched from Alexandria 2 days earlier, HMAS Sydney, in company with the British destroyer Havoc, has been assigned 2 tasks: to intercept Italian shipping in the Gulf of Athens and to support the 2nd destroyer flotilla on a submarine sweep north of Crete. In Sydney, Captain John Collins decides the British destroyers should assume priority and thus keeps his cruiser within a safe distance to the north. The decision would prove to be fateful. Outbound from Tripoli are 2 Condottieri-class cruisers, Bartolomeo Colleoni and Giovanni della Bandenere, bound for Leros in the Greek islands and carrying the flag of Vice Admiral Ferdinando Casardi. Light armor and huge power plants enable phenomenal top speeds of 41 knots, making the Condottieris the fastest cruisers ever built. Each carries 8 6-inch and 6 4-inch guns, torpedoes and seaplanes. At 7:20 a.m. on the 19th, less than 5 miles north of Cape Busa, the Italian and British divisions would sight each other at 18,000 yards, ghost-like in the dawn haze. In Hyperion, the lead British destroyer, the ship's company have just fallen out from dawn action stations. And so it is with the smell of breakfast drifting up through the voice pipes. The lookout announces 2 cruisers on the starboard bow, before pausing to add, "And they're Italian too." Battle ensigns hoisted and alarms howling, the 4 destroyers now swing violently away to the northeast under full rudder at 30 knots. Those closest to the Italians, Hyperion and Ilex, open fire with 4.9-inch guns, but in vain. Casardi in della Bandenere now increases speed and turns to port through 90 degrees, opening the range to take advantage of his heavier weapons. 7 minutes later, he opens fire as Hyperion, now fleeing for her life, furiously signals her position to Sydney. Unbeknown to the destroyers, Collins and his cruiser are only 40 miles to the north, instead of the anticipated 100. Hyperion's report jolts the ships into action, and machinery shrieking, Sydney and Havoc now swing south by southwest at speed. As his men race to action stations, Collins now faces a grim choice, in that the enemy report has not specified just what type of Italian cruisers he's racing to confront. 7,000-ton 6-inch Condottieris will be difficult enough. 14,000-ton 8-inch Zaras, on the other hand, is a suicide mission. Collins and Sydney charge on nonetheless.
I think one of the things that battle demonstrates right from the outset, though, is the aggressive use of maritime forces and looking to establish and then really drive home to the Italians psychological dominance that came from that aggressive use, that confidence, that assumption of victory that comes from the British and Australian navies in terms of all their dealings with the Italians.
In Hyperion, Commander Hugh Nicholson desperately awaits a reply from Sydney. None is forthcoming. Instead, Collins has chosen to maintain strict radio silence. His anxious destroyers do not know of his whereabouts, but neither does Casardi. Racing below deck, meanwhile, the ship's company prepare for battle. Among them is Richard Curtis, who now assembles his gunners in A turret and waits.
The news of the attack on our destroyers acted like an electric shock on the ship's company, though all signs of panic were conspicuous by their absence. There was a fight inside. Soon, everyone is in full battle dress, closed up at action stations. And during the lull, 300 pairs of eyes searched the horizon, vainly endeavoring to discover if they're light cruisers like us, or heavy.
Just before 8 a.m., Casardi, still unaware of Sydney's presence, decides to press the attack and swings his division around to the east, closing the range rapidly. In Hyperion, Commander Hugh Nicholson holds desperately onto his northeast course as 6-inch shot falls all around. The Italians, though, are firing against the sun at long range and score no hits. Yet. At 8:26, Sydney's lookouts sight the Italian cruisers 2 points before the starboard beam at 23,000 yards and bearing east. Collins now breaks radio silence with an enemy report, and at 8:29, with Bandineri in his sights at 20,000 yards, opens fire. Minutes later, Hyperion's captain sights Sydney surging over the horizon.
The most welcome sign in the world. Rushing to the south, guns flashing, battle ensigns streaming, and such a smother of foam that from our destroyers, one seemed almost to hear the high-tension scream of the machinery driving her across the water.
Stunned at the apparent fall of 6-inch shot from a yet unseen enemy, the Italians nonetheless return accurate fire from all turrets at 8:32. Within 3 minutes, however, Sydney scores her first hit through Bandineri's forward funnel, killing 4. Shaken, Casadi now turns his ships to the southeast, making heavy smoke. Nicholson, meanwhile, turns his destroyers through 180 degrees to the southwest, anticipating an order to close and attack with torpedoes. Casadi now counters with a southwest turn of his own, minimizing his ship's profile. Now reunited with Nicholson's squadron, Sydney, with her 5 consorts line abreast, charges in pursuit, firing furiously. At 9:08, with Bandineri obscured by a heavy smokescreen, Collins now shifts his guns to Colleoni and alters course 30 degrees to starboard, opening up A arcs and bringing all 4 turrets to bear at 18,000 yards. In the turrets themselves, gunners jam shell after shell into the hot breaches. With all guns engaged, 64 high-explosive 100-pound projectiles now roar out over the sea each minute. The salvos are accurate, effective, and manifest. In Sydney, Richard Curtis observes,
It must be hell on there now. All our guns are now bearing, and broadside after broadside pours into her. Her bows have been blown away, and she's sinking by the head. At 9:25, she fires one last salvo, but Y turret answers it and finally silences her. 2 of our destroyers help her on the way with torpedoes, which blow her to pieces.
Up ahead in Bandineri, Casadi, after a moment's hesitation, abandons Colleoni to her fate, fleeing to the south at 38 knots. Leaving 3 of his destroyers to rescue Italian survivors, Collins continues the chase, but in vain, and at 10:22 takes his final shots at 22,000 yards, leaving only 10 rounds in his forward turrets. The battle is over, and exhausted, the men now fall out from action stations. In less than 2 hours, they have fired 181 salvos comprising more than 950 rounds. The blistered and blackened barrels of the now still turrets, a silent testament. On deck, the moods range from jubilant to reflective, effusive to silent, triumphant to grimly satisfied.
It's all sort of mixed up. Before the ship opens fire, you're all keyed up. Sometimes you find yourself trembling, not with fear, but with the strain of waiting. Then, when the action begins, it's all excitement. If you know you're hitting the enemy, there's a feeling of elation. Then you see the hits smacking into the other ship with the flashes and the smoke and the red-hot steel, and try to think what you'd be feeling. That's where discipline and training come in. For a brief period, you want to stop. It passes. So you continue belting away, but you do it mechanically. The feeling of elation is gone. It's been replaced by a sort of cold efficiency. And then you seem to do your best work.
Meanwhile, Hyperion, Ilex, and Havoc commence the rescue of 550 of Colleoni's officers and men, all the while coming under heavy aerial bombardment from the Italian Air Force. During the afternoon, Havoc takes a direct hit. Holed below the waterline and badly damaged, the night of the 19th thus sees the squadron compromised and overflowing with prisoners, grimly limp towards home. Luck would be with them, however, and at 11 a.m. on the 20th, having sailed through the night without further incident, the ships would make a triumphant return to Alexandria. Cunningham had given a general signal, and every warship in harbour would clear lower deck in their honour.
The entire Mediterranean fleet is lying at anchor, and as we slowly steam up the long line with our battle flag at the foremast, every ship cheers to a man. It's something I'll never forget.
Once berthed, jubilant sailors exhibit the battle damage, an impressive but unimportant gash in the forward funnel, courtesy of Bandineri's 6-inch guns. That afternoon, 550 young Australians are granted victory leave in Alexandria, as news of their exploits spreads like wildfire throughout the Middle East and the world. A depressed Mussolini would claim that the Italians had not reckoned with the devilish cheek of the Australians, while a freshly decorated Collins would go on to praise his ship's design and superb weaponry. Most of all, though, the victory belonged to the men, and Saturday, July the 20th, 1940, would prove to be an excellent day to be an Australian in Alexandria.